So here we are back again for another PvP Encyclopedia episode for Dark Souls 3. So, you all said I was crazy, you all said I was mad when I decided to make this build. But this has been something that's kind of been, niggling away at the back of my head for a while. Is it possible to make a character at 120 that is at the very least semi-viable in PvP, that has max HP plus HP regen? So that's what I set out to do. So before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone that this series is eventually trying to encompass all things about Dark Souls 3 PvP, from tactics to builds to weapon breakdowns, and this is going to be a build video. Now, when it comes down to builds, we're going to try and showcase pretty much everything that is at least somewhat interesting or relevant to the meta. As I'm sure we can all agree, Dark Souls 3 is a little bit more limited in terms of the cool things that you can do in Dark Souls 2, so that's kind of why we wanted to make this series, just so we can highlight the cool things that you can do, so you can look it up and see what you think and try it out for yourself. So I think this is something that is one of the cool things that you can do, and I think max HP plus HP regen is an interesting concept, so let's get into the video and see how things go. So let's get one thing straight, I fucking suck at Dark Souls 3 PvP. So if I end up doing well with a build, it means that it's clearly doing something right, and eventually I got this build to work. So before I got the build to work, initially I was using Anri's Greatsword. Now on paper this seems like a great idea. Now I've not played Dark Souls 3 PvP since before they patched Greatswords and added poise into the game, and that came with a big downside to straight swords. They became basically shit, and I was wondering what the fuck was going on, because I couldn't beat anybody in the arena using Anri's Greatsword. And on paper Anri's Greatsword seems fucking great, because not only do you have the Sun Princess ring, the Oak Shield, and Anri's sword giving you passive HP regen, you have replenishment, as well as you can buff Anri's sword with Blessed Weapon, so you've got fucking HP regen out the ass when you've got Anri's sword. But sadly, Anri's Greatsword, you just cannot fucking beat anyone with it. And this isn't down to Anri's Greatsword being bad. With the right build, Anri's Greatsword is really good, and again, for PvE it's fucking amazing. But when it comes to PvP, because of that patch, straight swords just are not what they used to be. And frankly, actually, I think that's pretty good, because straight swords are really just fucking dominating everything. For whatever reason, they've still not patched the Karthus curved sword, so fuck me, whatever. But instead of using Anri's Greatsword, I eventually decided to switch to the S-Stock. Now a raw S-Stock is actually fantastic, and given that we're trying to get max HP with 120, the raw S-Stock was a really good choice, and eventually ended up making me play in a certain way which ended up benefiting the build overall. You may lose out on the 2 HP a second tick from Anri's Greatsword, but you gain in other factors, one being a usable weapon. Now sadly, I do understand that the build doesn't have max HP regen, and if you want to know how to get absolute max HP regen, I really suggest you go look at Limit Breaker's video on. It's very, very entertaining, as with all their videos. But it would have been nice to get that amount of HP regen in the build, but it's really about striking a balance between what's actually usable and what isn't usable. So I think I've found a good balance here. Again, tried to have Anri's Greatsword, but it just wasn't working. You could have Soothing Sunlight in the build as well, but that would require making big sacrifices and another stat. So, it's just not particularly worth it, really, when it comes down to it. So this is the happy medium that I'm going for, personally. Obviously, you can do whatever the fuck you want, but this is just what I went for. And trying to get in max HP regen, as well as max HP at 120, what would even be the point? You'd have zero offensive capability at that stage. For instance, when the ring, the shield, and the 2 miracles are all on at the same time, you're getting back about 10 HP per second, and over the course of a duel, you could realistically get almost 1000 HP back, maybe even more, if you're lucky. So, yeah, right, we'll move on to how to use the build. It should be fairly obvious, you're using an S-Stock, just do S-Stock things, but there's a couple of nuances that I suppose you kind of want to do, or at least, given that I'm bad at PvP, nuances that I had to do in order to win. But it certainly, plays to the build's strengths, at least. So far in the video, I've been using footage from people using Greatswords. Now, most people seem to be using Greatswords in the arena. I don't blame them, because, they got the buff and they are pretty decent. However, the S-Stock is actually incredibly good at dealing with people with Greatswords, and that only really plays in your favour, considering that a lot of people are using Greatswords, so most of the people you're going to be coming up against will be using Greatswords. Obviously amongst other weapons, but just general percentage wise. Now in terms of the strategy that you want to use for this build, you actually just straight up want to be as conservative as possible. The whole point in this build is to capitalise on your opponent's mistakes. At least for me anyway, because I'm really shit at the game. So basically, because the S-Stock is so fast, it completely shreds great swords because of the wind up frames. You're able to attack fast enough to knock them out before they get the hyper armor. You're able to attack fast enough, you know, when they're still in their wind down frames, so they can't actually get away from your attacks. So as long as you're out of the range, as soon as they start attacking, you go into attack. So you miss their attack and you hit them with your attack, and that's pretty much how you should be dealing with everyone. There are a few more nuances with other weapons, so let's get into that as well. So when dealing with other thrusting sword class weapons, it's basically whoever's the better player will win. Now this guy beat me before and then I beat him, and it was just whoever really was the better player. Now what you saw there though was something I found quite interesting, and so many players fall for this. When you use the S-Stock sword art, people will dodge away from it obviously, unless you get them with it well timed, and it's quite easy to time it well, and it's so fucking good. But anyway, if they dodge away from it, they notice that there's a bit of a pause, so when they come back in, you can just keep attacking out of that pause instead of running away, and people will just run straight into your S-Stock attacks. It's fantastic. Now, basically the only thing that will ever give you a problem is this guy's weapon here, which is the Crystal Rapier, and it's the only one that can actually outspace you. Not by much though, so it's easy enough to play around. But basically, when it comes down to thrusting swords, it's just whoever's the better player. Something I will say though that I did pick up on is two-handing your thrusting sword tends to outplay their one-handed thrusting sword, simply because it does seem to be a little bit faster, and being able to use the rolling attacks, you can get your rolling attack out faster than they can get their like one-handed normal attack out. At least that seems to be about the case anyway. Also, if they're running at you, you just put your shield up and poke them, and you'll stag them out the run before they can get the running attack in, because it's lightning fast. So there's a couple of tips, I suppose. Now when it comes to katanas, using this build is actually hilarious, because if you play conservatively and back off, they just end up resorting, like this guy, to fucking running attacks, and running attacks are the easiest thing to counter because of that just there. As soon as you see them run, you do the weapon art and you just stag them out of it. Like, this guy, it's so fucking easy. Now, another thing is, using the two-handed moveset should be in theory quite good against katanas. If you roll into them and they go to attack you, your rolling attack is going to be so much faster than their one-handed attack that you're pretty much going to win every single time. Now, just like great swords and ultra great swords, great axes, and basically all ultra great class weapons are going to be fairly easy. However, there's one thing that you do need to watch out for. If they can predict your attack and can sort of stagger their own attacks and make you think they've ran out of stamina or whatever, then, you know, they can fire in an attack and get you as you're going in for the attack. You know, that's going to hurt. So basically that's the only thing you need to watch out for. As long as you can make educated guesses about how much stamina they've got, or make sure that you've spaced your attacks well, you're going to have an easy enough time, honestly. Sure, they can do a decent amount of damage, but considering how slow they are and considering that you're constantly regenerating health, if you take a hit, they're not going to hit you for so long that you're going to have most of your health back at that point anyway. Because, I mean, it's pretty hard to hit anyone with, like, ultra class weapons in this game as it is. So, with this build, you should be having a good time. Now, when it comes to spears and I suppose lances in this case, they can actually prove a bit of a strange issue because you're both using Z-axis weapons. Because they're so much longer than you don't really have many effective attacks. So, really, what I learned that you need to do is, when they're attacking, you need to roll around to their right, your left. And the two-handed rolling attack works especially well in this case, but otherwise, you know, faster spears as well are going to give you quite a difficult time. I know some people have been using the Dragon Slayer spear, and that was a bit of an issue. So, you know, you really got to get your timings in, like, correctly with them. Now, if there's something I will ever suggest, is do not ever try to use the S-Stock running attacks against a spear, because they will just capitalise so hard on that. So you really want to try and roll around them, because you have the advantage of your rolling attacks being lightning fast and theirs being kind of shit. So you need to take advantage of that in order to counter spears. But once you've got them in that kind of like uncounterable, like their weapon is garbage against yours, you pretty much auto win against them. But basically spears are going to give you a harder time than most other weapons. So something that is obviously an issue for pretty much everyone is curved swords, but notably the Karthus curved sword. I don't know why this weapon has not been patched. Seriously, it is just straight up unfair. You all know that. and it is very hard to actually find openings and capitalise on mistakes, because the Carthus Curved Sword is one of the few things that are faster than an S-Stock, and it's so fast that it doesn't matter that you outspace it. So, like, how do you really defeat it? So, I have beaten some people with the Carthus Curved Sword. It's not impossible, but it really is such a versatile weapon that it's hard to find your openings. Doing baits, like what you just saw there, is, as you can clearly see, like, very counterable for them using a Carthus. So you really do need to just take it as the individual. You need to look at where they're fucking up and what they're doing that might be, you know, punishable, really. I suppose two-handing your S-Stock can make it a little bit easier because the rolling attacks are just so fucking fast that you might be able to, you know, get them as they're doing the running attack. So that is something. But the Carthus is obviously going to be an issue no matter what. If you're using the S-Stock and you're going against anyone using fist weapons, if you lose, then you're just straight up worse than me at the game. It is almost impossible to lose against someone using fist weapons because you outrange them so fucking hard. Like, the S-Stock is just a hard counter to fists because it's basically as fast and it's just got so much extra range. So fists don't even need a specific strategy. You're just gonna win. Like, that's the strategy against beating fists. Just pull out the fucking S-Stock. And I suppose, you know, finally, straight swords. They're not gonna be a problem, really, because you pretty much outspeed them and you outrange them. And that, you know, provides a pretty decent combination for hard countering straight swords. I mean, there's a reason why S-Stocks were considered so good to begin with. Especially when, you know, the meta was dominated by straight swords, the S-Stock was still there as a sort of dominant force. However, not all straight swords are going to be so easy, and that brings us on to Valor Heart, which I'll tell you right now is probably one of the fucking hardest things you'll ever need to, like, deal with. It's just a great fucking weapon, and Valor Heart is going to fuck your shit up because it seems to be a weird hard counter to the S-Stock. For some reason, like, when they attack, if they're attacking at the same time as you, they're just gonna fucking take basically no damage, poise through your hit, and then hit you, and then combo the fuck out of you. And because of how aggressive it is, it's quite hard to play conservatively against the Valor Heart. So it ends up meaning that you can't take advantage of having all that health and all that HP regen because they just keep coming and coming and coming, and it's quite hard to counter Valor Heart. Obviously, again, it's not impossible, but it will be one of those weapons that will, you know, show its worth against you, really. So anyway, onto the build stats itself. You can see we have 99 Vigor, so again, you know, max HP, of course. 14 Attunement, which allows us to use both our miracles. 27 Endurance, which is actually quite a lot. Interestingly enough, when I tried to min-max this build, the Deprived was definitely the best. I was initially using the Knight, and if you wanted these stats at 120, it had basically no endurance, but the Deprived really came through and is without a doubt the best, because we want to be minimising on basically every other stat. So 27 endurance is really good and that worked out well. The 10 vitality is okay, we can deal with it. Given how defense works in this game, it really doesn't particularly matter what you're wearing as armor anyway, but this at least allows us to have some armor, bit more than normal, whatever. 12 strength and 12 dex. It's low, but the 12 strength is needed for the oak shield and the 12 dex is needed for the S-Stock. So, you know, that works out fine. 10 intelligence doesn't matter, 10 luck doesn't matter, and the 15 faith allows us to use replenishment and blessed weapon, which will be obviously cast in like every single game. Now, in terms of equipment, we've obviously got the raw S-Stock plus 10, the Wreath Your Oak Shield plus 5, the Priest Chime plus 10. Given the equipment that we've got, I worked out that the heaviest armor set we can generally wear is the Dragon Slayer armor. So, you know, you can min-max your armor however you want. I've tried to get the Gauntlet of Thorns in there, but we're just over, so that was a bit of a shame because the S-Stock actually weighs a little bit more than Anri's sword, so it kind of fucked me up a little bit. But overall, the Dragon Slayer armor is really good. Got Havel's Ring, Ring of Favour plus 2 because of the HP, of course, the Sun Princess Ring, and of course the Life Ring plus 3. All in all, with these rings and everything set up, in the arena it gives you fucking 1600 HP, which is fucking nuts. That gives you insane longevity, and because of the HP regen, you've actually technically got way more than 1600 HP. And on that note, I hope I showed the worth of this build. I had a lot of fun putting this video together, and I hope you had a lot of fun watching it. So please, if you did, like the video because it really fucking helps. And as a final thing, I really do want to say a massive, massive, unbelievable thank you to everyone that is a patron on Patreon. Really, you're fucking keeping this channel alive like so bastard hard right now. And we're really trying to get back on our feet. We've got a lot of videos coming up, a lot of good ideas, especially once the Dark Souls 3 DLC's out, you know, the next one. But yeah, I suppose we'll leave it at that, and I'll see you in the next PvP video. Bye.